Your body often answers before you do. Before you decide that a room feels unsafe, your shoulders have already tightened. Before you admit that a sentence hurt, heat has risen into your face. Before the mind finds the word grief, the chest has become heavy, the throat has narrowed, and the world seems to move at a different speed. Then the narrator arrives. It explains, it labels, it says, I am anxious, I am angry, I am afraid, I am fine. But what if the body began the sentence before the mind supplied the words? What if thinking is not something that happens above the neck, sealed inside a private room, but a conversation moving through breath, heartbeat, memory, posture, chemistry, sensation and awareness? For centuries, philosophy has asked how the mind and body touch. How can physical matter produce a private world? How can electrical activity become the feeling of blue, the ache of loss, the taste of rain, or the silent certainty that you are here? The question sounds abstract until your body becomes impossible to ignore. A doctor can measure the pulse. A scan can reveal patterns of activity. A blood test can describe chemistry. But none of those measurements, by themselves, contain what it feels like to wait for news you are afraid to receive. The body can be measured from the outside. The mind is lived from within. And somewhere between those two truths stands one of the deepest problems in human thought, the mind-body problem. Not merely whether mind and body influence each other, that much is difficult to deny. A frightening thought can accelerate the heart. A sleepless night can darken the emotional world. Pain can narrow attention. A familiar voice can settle the breath. The deeper mystery is how any of this becomes experience at all. Why is there something it is like to inhabit this body? Why does matter not simply move, but matter to someone? And if the body is already shaping the thought before the thought becomes conscious, where does the mind actually begin? Consider a phrase people use when they want to minimise suffering. It is all in your head. The phrase imagines a clean border. On one side, the physical world, solid, measurable, real. On the other, the mind, private, vague, perhaps exaggerated. But grief does not respect that border. Neither does shame, desire, loneliness, relief, or love. Grief can change appetite. Shame can lower the eyes before a reason is spoken. Anxiety can live in the jaw, the stomach, the hands. Relief may arrive as a long breath that leaves the body before the mind says it is over. This does not mean every sensation has one simple psychological cause. It does not mean a person can diagnose the mind by reading the body. It means something quieter and more important. Human experience is not neatly divided into a real body and an imaginary mind. The insult hurts because meaning becomes physical. The embrace matters because touch becomes meaning. Think of the nervous system less like a wire carrying orders from a chief executive and more like an orchestra listening while it plays. The rhythm changes the melody changes the rhythm. No single instrument contains the performance, yet the performance is not separate from the instruments. You are not a ghost receiving reports from a machine. You are not merely a machine pretending to have a ghost. You are the unresolved intimacy between a living organism and a world it can feel. But here is the question most people miss. If emotion is bodily, why does it still feel like something from the inside? We can describe trembling as muscle activity. We can describe a racing heart as physiology. We can track patterns associated with fear. Yet the description and the fear are not identical, in the way a map and a landscape are not identical. The map can be accurate, it can guide us, it can reveal relationships the traveller cannot see, but the map does not become the cold air on your skin. To understand why this distinction became so powerful, we have to return to the thinker at the beginning of this series. René Descartes lived in a world being transformed by mechanical explanation. Nature increasingly appeared to operate through motion, structure and law. Bodies could be investigated as systems. Hearts pumped, muscles pulled, nerves carried signals. The universe looked less like an enchanted hierarchy and more like an immense mechanism. But Descartes believed one thing resisted mechanical description: thought itself. Matter occupied space. It had shape, size, position and motion. Mind did not seem to have any of those properties. A thought was not 6 inches long. A memory did not weigh 3 ounces. Doubt had no obvious location in the way a hand or a stone had a location. So Descartes drew a distinction between extended matter and thinking reality. The body belonged to the world of extension. The mind belonged to the world of thought. The distinction protected something that still feels undeniable. A complete description of the body's movement seems to leave out the first-person fact that someone is living through it. Imagine two people with the same posture, the same pulse, and the same words: "I am fine." One is genuinely calm. The other is holding together a private collapse. The outward pattern can resemble itself, while the inward worlds differ. Dualism gives that inward world full reality. It refuses to dismiss consciousness as a side effect that does not count. It says the person is not exhausted by a diagram of the person. But this is where the old solution becomes a new problem. If mind and body are fundamentally different kinds of reality, how do they interact? How does an intention lift an arm? How does damage to the brain alter memory, personality, language or awareness? How does a chemical entering the bloodstream transform the texture of experience? If the mind has no extension, where does it meet the extended body? And if the body is governed by physical processes, what room is left for a non-physical cause to intervene? Descartes did not ignore interaction. He knew hunger, pain and emotion made mind and body feel intimately joined. His difficulty was explaining how two radically different things could form the single life we actually experience. The inheritance of that difficulty is still with us. Every time we call the brain hardware and the mind software, we quietly revive the split. Every time we say, "my body," as though the speaker were a tenant and the body an apartment, we repeat it. Every time we imagine a tiny observer behind the eyes watching a screen, the old picture returns. Yet daily life keeps undoing the picture. The body is not a container for the mind. It is part of the way a world becomes present. Close your eyes and notice how you know you are here. You may feel pressure where the body meets the chair. You may sense the position of your hands without looking. You may notice the rise of the chest, the weight of the face, the temperature of the air, the pulse beneath the skin. Some of this information comes from the outside. Some comes from the position and movement of the body. Some comes from within. Heartbeat, breathing, hunger, tension, temperature, pain, fullness, and countless chemical conditions that never become clear thoughts. The broad scientific term for sensing and regulating the internal condition of the body is interoception. It is not a magical sixth sense and not a single meter hidden in the brain. It refers to processes through which bodily signals are sensed, interpreted, integrated, and used in regulation.
Most of this conversation never enters awareness. Your body does not wait for a conscious vote before adjusting circulation or breathing, but internal signals can contribute to mood, attention, emotion, and the felt sense of being a self. This matters because the narrator often speaks last and takes credit first. Someone sends a brief message. We need to talk. Before any explanation forms, the stomach drops. Attention narrows. Old memories become easier to retrieve. The mind begins producing futures: rejection, conflict, loss. Soon there is a complete story, and the story feels as though it caused everything. But the experience may have emerged through a loop. Words altered bodily state. Bodily state changed what seemed important. Memory supplied examples. Prediction colored the future. The future intensified the body. Then the narrator assembled the movement into a sentence. I know what this means. The sentence may be right. It may be wrong. Either way, it did not create the whole event alone. This is why telling someone to stop thinking about anxiety can fail so completely. The thought is not a detached object floating above the body. It is participating in a living pattern. And this is also why bodily practices can influence mental life without proving that consciousness is nothing but physiology. Breath, posture, sleep, movement, medication, environment, memory, relationship, and meaning can all enter the same conversation from different directions. The mind is not a king ruling the body. The body is not a servant carrying out mental commands. The boundary is more porous than the language suggests, but a more detailed conversation is still not a complete answer.
Suppose a researcher could watch every relevant change as a person touches a hot surface. Signals travel, muscles withdraw, attention shifts, networks coordinate, the person cries out. The whole chain might be described with extraordinary precision. Where in that description is the hurt? Not where is pain processed, not which activity is associated with reporting pain, not what function pain serves. Those are essential questions, and science has made profound progress by asking them. The harder question is why any of that processing is accompanied by an experience at all. A map can show where pain is processed. It still does not feel the pain. This is sometimes called an explanatory gap, the distance between objective accounts of physical processes and the subjective character of experience. The word gap does not prove the distance can never be crossed. It does not establish a soul, defeat neuroscience, or guarantee dualism. It names the fact that correlation, function, and mechanism do not automatically answer why there is something it is like to be the system. Colour makes the problem vivid. Physics can describe wavelengths. Biology can describe receptors. Neuroscience can investigate the pathways and activity associated with seeing. Psychology can study categorisation and memory. Yet a person born without vision could learn all of those facts without thereby receiving the experience of red. The facts are not false. They are simply facts viewed from one direction. Experience is the same event viewed from within. Or perhaps it is not the same event. That is the argument. Modern philosophy offers several broad answers, and each preserves something while paying a price. Physicalism says, in its many forms, that mind is ultimately physical. Consciousness may be what certain organised biological processes do, or a property that emerges when matter is arranged and interacting in the right way. The strength of this view is continuity. Human beings remain part of nature. Changes to the brain affect experience because experience depends on physical organisation. No second substance has to enter the causal story. Its challenge is the glow from within. If we explain every function, discrimination, memory, report, attention, learning, action, have we explained experience, or only everything experience enables us to do? A physicalist may answer that a complete science will dissolve the apparent gap, or that our concepts are creating a mystery where none exists. But the debate remains open. Dualism answers differently. It insists that subjective experience cannot be reduced to physical description because mind and matter are fundamentally distinct, or because mental properties are not identical to physical properties. Its strength is fidelity to the first person. Pain is not treated as less real because it cannot be placed on a scale. Its challenge is interaction and dependence. The closer the relationship between brain and mind appears, the harder it becomes to explain why changes in one so reliably transform the other if they belong to separate orders. A third family of views questions the starting division itself. Neutral monism suggests that mind and matter may be two ways of describing something more basic. Panpsychist approaches propose, in different forms, that experience, or experience-like properties, belong more deeply to nature than we usually assume. These views do not say that stones write poetry, or that every object has a human mind. They ask whether consciousness is easier to understand if it is not expected to appear from ingredients that are wholly devoid of anything experiential.
Their strength is that they refuse to manufacture mind from an absolute absence of mind. Their challenge is combination. How would simpler experiential features become the unified consciousness of a person? Why is there one apparent field of experience here rather than billions of disconnected fragments? No option leaves the room without a bill. Physicalism must explain subjectivity. Dualism must explain interaction. Views that place experience deep in nature must explain organisation and unity. This is not a failure of thought. It is what honest thought looks like near a boundary.
And this is why the science becomes personal. The mind-body problem is not only about what the universe contains, it shapes how you interpret your own life. If you imagine the body as a machine and the real you as a hidden passenger, you may treat exhaustion as betrayal. You may hear pain as an interruption rather than information. You may believe discipline means the mind defeating the body.
If you imagine the person as nothing but machinery, you may become tempted to treat meaning as decoration. Grief becomes chemistry, love becomes reward circuitry, choice becomes computation, and the vocabulary of mechanism begins pretending it has eliminated the life it describes. But explaining how a process is supported does not make the process meaningless. Music depends on vibration. That does not make the song unreal. A promise depends on sound, memory, social practice, and nervous systems. That does not make the promise merely noise. Meaning may be embodied without being trivial. Research on bodily self-consciousness makes this even stranger. The ordinary feeling that this body is mine, that I am located here, and that I see from this point of view depends in part on the integration of touch, vision, balance, movement, and internal signals. Under carefully controlled conditions, some aspects of body ownership or self-location can be shifted. That can sound disturbing. If the felt self can be altered, is it fake? No. Flexible does not mean fake. Constructed does not mean unreal. Your visual world is constructed through active processing, but the tree does not vanish when you learn about vision. A melody is constructed across time, but it is not an illusion because no single note contains the song. A self may depend on integration without being a lie. The more precise conclusion is that the embodied point of view is an achievement. The nervous system continually brings many signals into a usable perspective. Here, now, this body, this danger, this possibility, this action. The point of view is stable enough to live through and flexible enough to adapt.
Yet the fact that integration contributes to a sense of self still does not tell us why integrated signals are accompanied by awareness. We return to the same luminous remainder. There is a world for someone. The question now reaches beyond philosophy seminars. Artificial intelligence can produce language, identify patterns, plan actions, and model human responses. Those capacities matter. But fluent behaviour alone does not settle whether there is a subjective point of view behind the performance. The problem is not that machines are made of matter, while humans are made of magic. Humans are physical beings too. The problem is that we still do not know which forms of organisation are sufficient for experience, or how we would recognise experience when it cannot speak from a body like ours. Medicine also stands at this boundary. A clinician must investigate the body from the outside while listening to a world reported from within. Test results matter, so does the patient's description. Neither perspective can simply replace the other. A number without a person can miss meaning. A feeling without investigation can miss danger. Relationships may reveal the union most clearly. Another person's words change your pulse. Your expression changes their breathing. Tone becomes chemistry. Touch becomes trust or threat through history and context. Two embodied points of view continually interpret and alter one another. Mind meets body everywhere because perhaps mind and body were never separate events. Perhaps the deeper question is not how mind touches body, but how one living process can be described from outside as matter in motion and lived from inside as a meaningful world. That possibility does not solve consciousness. It changes the shape of the mystery. For a moment, let the mystery become direct. Notice one sensation before naming it. Not the diagnosis, not the story, not what the sensation should mean. Only its texture. Pressure, warmth, movement, tightness, rhythm, tingling, heaviness, or perhaps an absence where you expected something to be. See how quickly language arrives. Comfortable, uncomfortable, anxiety, hunger, fatigue, mine. There is nothing wrong with the language. Naming helps us act and communicate, but for a few seconds, notice the distance between sensation and explanation. When does pressure become emotion? When does emotion become a story? When does the story become me? You do not need to force an answer. This is observation, not a test and not medical advice. If attention to the body feels uncomfortable, let the exercise go and return to the room around you. The point is simply to notice that experience is already happening before the narrator finishes its account. The body is not beneath the mind. It is not dead matter waiting for consciousness to issue commands. It is living history, active prediction, inherited form, present sensation, and relationship with a world. The mind is not easily lifted out of that life. Every memory was learned through a body. Every idea arrives through attention shaped by need. Every spiritual question is asked by a breathing creature standing somewhere. And still, after every mechanism is described, experience remains present, not as proof that science has failed, not as proof that spirit has won, as the fact that made science, philosophy, and spiritual inquiry possible in the first place. Something is here to wonder. Descartes divided thinking reality from extended matter because he could not see how extension alone could contain thought. Modern science has shown that mental life is far more embodied, distributed, and dependent on physical processes than his picture allowed. But dependence is not yet explanation, and description is not yet experience. Perhaps mind is what the living body does at a certain depth of organisation. Perhaps mind is a feature of reality that matter never lacked. Perhaps the division between inner and outer is useful without being ultimate. We do not know. But ignorance here is not emptiness. It is a disciplined opening. It keeps us from reducing people to machinery, and it keeps us from using mystery as permission to ignore evidence. It asks us to hold two truths at once. Your experience depends profoundly on a body, and no view from outside has yet replaced what it is like to be that body from within. So where does mind begin? At the edge of the brain? In the rhythm of the heart? In the conversation between organism and world? In the instant sensation becomes meaning? Or in a dimension our current language divides before it can understand? The next time your body answers before you do, pause before calling it irrational. Listen for the sentence forming beneath the words. Then ask yourself, where do you feel the boundary between your body and your mind? And does it stay in the same place?